This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi there.
Okay, the first thing is the minutes of last time, which was January 24th. And those who were here, if you can make a motion to approve them.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
Okay. And everybody else? Okay, that was here? Okay. All right. The first thing on our agenda is the spring cleanup. And Pam is here to talk about where we are with that and what's happening so far and what's been done and what we need to do, because it'll be coming up soon.
Our day is set up for the 19th. Snow and rain day is going to be on the 26th. Ian Preston is going to sponsor us again. And unless Loretta has heard otherwise from local businesses, he's the only sponsor that I've heard from.
Okay, let me just stop you for a moment.
Sure.
Since you mentioned that. I did hear from Tom King, who is the president of ABA, and he said basically that they haven't met all during the pandemic. And most of the businesses are a little depleted because a lot of their businesses haven't been what we call thriving. So what his suggestion is that if we send him an email saying what we're doing and what we would like, there's at least 60 people on his list that he will send it on out to first of all inform them of our cleanup day, and then also anything that we would ask them to do or how they could help us out. So that's.
Well, if you want to send me do you have his email address?
Yep, I can send it.
If you send it to me, I'll send him an email.
Right.
What we do need is, I think people have been taking off with our neon safety vests. We've really been depleted on those because we did have quite a few and they're pretty much gone now. But what I did do is I got in touch with David Husong from the Green Team in Pomfret, because they do a cleanup right around Earth Day every year. And I've noticed driving up to Pomfret afterwards, well, before the cleanup, I notice a lot of signage on the side of the road. And then afterwards, I have noticed their roads are noticeably cleaner. So I had a talk with him to ask him, you know, how he accomplished such a successful event, because ours has not been successful in the past few years. And what he told me was they make up flyers. I guess they put them in visible spots, probably post office, maybe gas stations, whomever will let them put them up with little tear-offs on them. And they can get in touch with the Green Team, tell them what roads they're signing up to clean. And he has a spreadsheet and a big map of the town where he can highlight the roads that people have agreed to clean up. And that way he keeps track of everything. They, before their bulky waste cleanup, he sets up at one of the local elementary schools, and they pass out the vests, they pass out bags. So they're doing a lot even before the day of the event. On a good year, 60% of their roads get cleaned, and that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's very, very successful. Now, what he mentioned to me, and it was something that I had been pondering, they do the clear recycling bags and regular opaque trash bags. And what they do is they will put them at intersections to be cleaned up. I asked him about the recycling because what we have discussed here is if any of the recycling items are dirty, that can cause, I guess, Willie Waste to reject an entire truckload of trash.
Right.
And many of the bottles and cans that I pick up, you pour dirt out of, they've got plants growing out of them. They've been sitting so long. And I don't know if it is worth risking having an entire truckload of trash turned away because we've tried to recycle dirty items. So, I mean, I wish is Christine here?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just got on.
Oh, okay, because you might have some feedback on that. Did you hear what I was talking about?
I just heard the last thing about a truckload of trash being turned away because it was dirty.
Right. If we tried during the roadside cleanups to do the clear recycling bags and put things that could be recycled in there, I understood everything has to be clean that goes to the transfer station, and that Willie Waste will turn away entire truckloads if they find dirty stuff in there.
Which
And this
means they
stuff
should
is
be turning away everything because I know people throw dirty stuff in.
Oh, well, I clean my stuff.
Yeah,
but
so do I, but I watch other people and they don't.
But I don't know what I should do, what I should recommend. Should I get clear recycling bags? Should I call Willie Waste and talk to them about it? I don't know what the right thing to do is because I don't want to, be working against what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah. Catherine, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, that's right. Catherine's here.
Thoughts on whether or not they're going to accept?
No,
No, what
whether we should even have a recycle kind of collect bags so that people can put them in, but is that going to be worth it to do that? Because then if there's dirty stuff in there, it's going to kick out the whole container and whatever else is in that.
But everything that's on the side of the road is going to be dirty.
It is.
Frankly.
It is.
It is. So I don't think it makes any sense to even try to
Okay.
separate.
Okay, because we have not been. And, I want to do the right thing. And the more I find out, more information I get, the more questions I have. So anyway, David was saying, excuse me?
I was going to say from personal experience, picking up
Yeah.
during one of these events, I can tell you that everything is pretty dirty and is
Yep.
broken.
Yep.
The cans are in half, they're whatever. And they've got all kinds of things in them. We all wear gloves to pick things up. And so trying to get that recycled doesn't seem to make a lot of sense considering what the rules are for the recycling.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion.
Well, I think that we're all coming to that opinion that everything is pretty gross that we're collecting. Now, he also said that, he does what we do. They advertise in the local paper. We do it in our section of the paper, the Nature Conservation. Steve, you contacted the elementary school to see if we could get any students or, groups that might be interested in coming and helping out. E.O. Smith, no one replied. I mean, I was in touch with them and communicated with them, but there was no interest. So that was a dead end for us.
I was going to say that they were very enthusiastic in their response. They were
great.
looking forward to doing it. They had, they thought they might make it a little contest or something, and they're more than happy to promote it, but they wanted more details. And I was kind of waiting. I sent you a late email reply. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But I think Tom King mentioned, they might be able to get gift cards or, something like that. And of course, that would provide some incentive for students to maybe do a better job. They just need to know the ground rules. And,
Okay, I can stop in this week and talk to them about it if that would help. That's fine.
Oh, sure. Do you know Troy?
No.
He's the principal. You
Okay.
should probably just call ahead.
Okay,
because
I will.
They have COVID protocols in place and all that.
Well, we
too.
could talk on the phone then, if,
Yeah, I'm sure you could.
Okay. That
You
sounds
also-
fine.
Catherine?
Thank you, Loretta. You also can have the town put out something through TextMyGov for people that have signed up for information about town events.
Oh, great.
Let me know if you want any advice on that. The reason
That
I
would
say
be
this is
great,
because
Catherine.
I probably know the system better than anybody else. Okay, so where that would go and who it would end up going out to, or would be people that signed up for particular categories of information.
Should I call you then at the town hall?
Not the town hall. You can call me at my home.
Oh, what's your number, please?
I'm going to give you both numbers. I'll give you my home phone, which
Okay.
is 860-487-6219. And my personal cell is 860-428-0011.
Thank you, Catherine. I will give you a call then this week.
Yeah, and in the meantime, I'll connect with the other person at town hall that knows how to do this. I know I trained her, so.
Great.
And talk to her about what the categories are now, how many people we have signed up for those, so you'll know what kind of an audience you'll get.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Catherine, if we were to do something like this in the future, would you be the person that we would call, or is there another person at the town hall that we should?
The person you would call would be the first selectman.
Okay.
Oh, Bill? Okay.
So, but I installed the system just before leaving office, and so I'm much more familiar with it than he is at this point.
Okay.
And so I can actually run some stats. I have access to the system as well.
Thank you, Catherine. That'd be a tremendous help.
And I would be running everything through Bill, through the first selectman.
Okay.
Sure that that's all done properly.
Well, I've worked with him before on this when I first started doing it.
Yeah,
When I used to be a Republican. I'm sorry.
I would pledge.
And moving merrily along.
Yes, let's.
So what
Pam,
the deal is now, Pam, is that people can pick up supplies at Knowlton Hall
Right.
between 8:45 and 9.
Well, probably even later, because remember, Ian and his family stay there really basically the whole time. So there will be people there if they can come later or whenever.
Yeah. So we'll just put it out that it's 8:45 to 9, and then people
Sure.
can come in.
That's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Christine?
I would pledge 2 $10 gift certificates for most bags collected to start a contest.
Right.
That's
Just
terrific.
Nice.
So I think
So
that
like to Dollar General or something.
Yeah, I don't know where. Somewhere I don't know about Dollar General. I'm not a real big fan of them.
I just wonder if kids would like that place.
Yeah, maybe Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh
Although that's where all the cups come from, so I don't know.
God, that's true too.
We do the liquor store, we
Are
really
we
do.
defeating our purpose here?
I don't know. I mean, I'm more, I'll entertain. I don't really like Dollar General that much. I don't know. Probably Dunkin' Donuts for kids, don't you think?
Well, you can also probably get a Visa gift card and they could use it wherever. Don't they have those like at Big Y?
No, that's just sort of pain. I don't want to do that to kids. I'd rather just, let me
Oh.
do, I pledge two $10 Dunkin' Donuts gift certificates.
Okay.
I will get them
Okay.
for the day.
Well, after picking up the trash, they should be responsible for what they do with their cups, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
I'll make a little-
about it for me.
I'll make a little note to go along with the gift certificate. Now remember to put your cups in the trash
Very good. All right.
or recycle or whatever. No, I guess they're not really recyclable.
Thanks a lot, Pam, for doing all that. And hopefully next year we can have ABA more involved, because Tom is really
Ugh.
interested. Just that COVID has, blasted everybody. So people
I
don't.
know,
And
I
they're just
know.
trying to keep themselves afloat. I mean, it's
Yeah.
wonderful that Ian is willing to do it again, but I think Ian is a pretty special person, has a very special family that.
Well, he was very enthusiastic about it. So that was awesome. I mean, he was great last year.
Yeah. And Christine, are you going to be around to take some pictures so we can?
I think so. I'm just checking my calendar again. I'm having cataract surgery, so.
Oh. And when is that?
Well, the first one's this Thursday. The next one's the 31st. So what day are we talking about? We're talking about,
Or the 26th.
I think,
So that should be okay.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yes.
I would like to get a picture of Ian and his truck kind of thing.
Right,
Just
with
to
masks on this time?
Pardon?
With masks on this time or?
Yes. Yeah, we will, make sure that people have their masks.
Yeah, because they had some good ones last time. They just didn't have their masks on.
Right.
Oh, Catherine, is it okay if Ian parks his work truck at Knowlton Hall like he did last time?
I'll confirm that with Bill.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The other thing too, is Ian doing the pickup of the trash, or are you going to be requesting the Public Works to?
I'll find out from him and let you know when I call you, okay?
Right.
He did do it last time. He was very good about doing that.
I don't expect there'll be any kind of an issue. So in fact, if you want to just call Bill and say, you'd like to be able for them to be able to park the trucks like they did last year, I'm sure he'd say yes.
Okay, great. I'll give him a call tomorrow.
You should tell Tammy so she could come and pick up too. Like she did last time.
She's no longer going to be our state rep. We got redistricted.
Oh, okay. Who is
So
our?
She might not want to come.
No, so who is that we should ask?
Pat Boyd from Pomfret.
So maybe we should ask him, huh?
50th district. Yeah, we should ask him. I can let him know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And tell him
Yeah,
Tammy came last
would
year.
probably be good for him in terms of his own publicity to kind of like show up right at the beginning when people are picking up their supplies.
Right.
Okay, all right. That sounds like that's underway. The next thing on the agenda is Sustainable Connecticut update. And Susan Eastwood and myself met with the Selectman Bill and Christine to really just go over a little bit about what sustainable is like, because when we were doing it in 2019, Bill wasn't the select person, although Christine helped us a lot on all of the details of things. And they were pretty open to working with us and helping us in any way. So sounds like that they're really on board of that. And we have gone ahead and some of our group met last week at the senior center with Kit and Melinda, who's also a member of our group. And we went over some of the things that are going on and some of the things that we already have done. And we're hoping to put some stuff on our dashboard before April 4th, so we can get a review of whether we need more from what we're doing. So they will review it and give us feedback, which should help us for the August 23rd date. So it seems like we're on board with that. Bill signed our Soul Smart letter, which is we're working with a group to help us publicize more solar. And we had a list of a couple of things on the letter that we would be doing. One is to have people who have solar write a little article, not an article, but a little statement in the Citizen to tell people the advantages or how they've experienced solar. And Melinda already agreed to do that. So we already got one person doing that. And then we hope to have a general meeting later on, maybe in the late spring or something, when we could probably meet outside, that and talk about the solar options and what's available and everything. So that's on the road, that we've got that going. And Janet and Stephanie are working with Mike, the land use, to write up the survey, the housing survey and everything. So that's in the works. And I believe it's in March, Janet, that we're going to have the survey distributed. And
Well, we're having the informational meeting at our March planning and zoning meeting, which will be the 14th. And then the surveys will go out sometime after that. I'm not sure what the time frame will be.
okay. And then the other thing that we talked a lot about was the pollinators thing, which Jennifer will update us on all the stuff that's going on there. But it seems like that's going to be a big project that will really help out us as sustainable in terms of getting a lot of points, but also help the town. And Kit at the senior center is very, very willing and able to work with us and very excited to be working with us. So I think we've got some allies going for ourselves now. So hopefully our job will be a lot easier than it was last time, which was quite a struggle. And then Christine is working on the arts component because she's involved in that aspect. So I think we got a good start on some things, and Christine and Bill will help us a little bit on stuff like the brownfields and stuff like that. And apparently there's a lot of stuff in the budget that should help us fill in or refresh some of the actions that we did in 2019. So that's it for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer, who has done some incredible things as the pollinator coordinator. She is just really literally putting us on the map in many ways. So go ahead, Jennifer.
Just a quick rundown. So we have a steering committee. Melinda actually is on that steering committee as well. So very active, doing stuff in town. Also, Heather McClevey, who is a member of Garden Club, and Marion Matthews has just said she'd help us as well. So we have a steering committee to sort of sort out ideas. And we've managed to get ourselves on the Pollinator Pathway website. So if you go under Connecticut Towns, the Ashford website is now live. Got some beautiful pictures of the town hall with the flowers in bloom in front of it. Also, we have a Facebook page, which is just called Ashford Pollinator Pathway, and have got an article that's coming out in the March Citizen, so hopefully will be in your mailboxes soon, which is basically the same text that's on the Pollinator Pathway website about what Pollinator Pathway is, what Ashford's doing, how you can get involved. And we're going to be doing a monthly article in the Ashford Citizen, and then the same text will appear on the Facebook page, just talking about different aspects of getting, things that we're doing in town. What is a native plants? How do you start a pollinator garden? We'll do features of pollinator gardens or properties. Been talking to some businesses in town, like Muddy Feet Farm and also Westford Hill Distillery, because they're sort of both committed, businesses that are committed to sort of native plants, non-pesticide use. So thinking of doing sort of partnerships with them in the future with different public events. And we also have a dedicated email that we're going to start pushing so that when people have questions, it's not getting lost in any of our personal, Yahoo boxes. So we've got that going on. And then, as Loretta said, Melinda's on the sustainability committee and was there when there was the discussion about potentially looking into doing a community garden and part of that would be a demo pollinator garden. And it sounds, I have, Melinda's sort of going to take the lead on keeping the steering committee informed about that, but it sounds like it would be a great location for it. And if the senior center director is excited about it, so much the better. So I think that's something that can definitely be worked on top of just PR, trying to get the word out. Also talking about doing some in-person events, not just with the two businesses that I was talking about, but with others in town. Possibly having a presence at the Tuesday concerts. Definitely going to have a presence probably with the garden club at the family day in September. And those are just things sort of off the top of my, and the other big thing that Melinda and I are actually working on is putting together native seed plants for the seed bank that's at the library. So we've already met with Carol Ann about that, the librarian, and she sort of explained what her process is. So at some point, and we're getting the list together of the plant seeds we're going to provide, and that's a free seed bank. So part of the seed bank is if you want to get some native plants seeds to start growing on your own, there will be some there as of April 1st. We'll have the packets to her. So, and we're also planning, besides that, is whenever we have some sort of public event, we would try to have some seed packets, possibly some seeds. We're trying to grow some of our own so people don't necessarily have to go and spend a small fortune, and informational handouts, because native seeds can be a little tricky depending on what type they are. They may actually need to overwinter. So getting some informational handouts to people when we give this kind of goodies to people at different events as to what to do with it, how to start a native garden, and so on. So that's all the stuff I can think of. Is there? Yeah, Christine.
That's fantastic. Go for it.
Okay.
Did I zone out, or did I hear something about a garden across from the liquor store?
That was a possibility that
Oh.
Christine had talked about at our meeting with her and Bill and Susan. And it's, first of all, it needs a lot of work. Secondly, there's a whole situation about the water and the fact that Ashford Park is on Connecticut water. And so then it becomes really hard of how we would get water. Plus, the other thing that Jennifer and I talked about, two things that we talked about, is it's kind of a dangerous road to have traffic coming in and out of, because people coming up the hill, it's not the best thing to have a public attraction at. And the other thing is that is town property, and it's not our best managed town property. So do we really want to call attention to town property that doesn't look so good? And yes, it would be a good project long term, but we don't have near the personnel or the amount of people involved to really make that happen. Maybe that's something for the future, but right now, no. Whereas it seems like we could start small at around the senior center and not have like this whole huge thing. And I was talking to both Melinda and Kit that we would start out small. We might just have our pollinator a model, and also maybe another model that we could, provide any produce that we grow, we could give it to like the food bank, for instance. That, so it's just in the beginning stages, and we're kind of looking around for, where places are that would not be hard to get started on and would be easily seen by a large number of people. So that was one of the reasons why it looked like the senior center might be a possibility. There is a pollinator, a small garden that Mary Matthews put in right by the library. So we already have that. So that would just involve, putting up a little sign, or even, I thought, since you're having this monthly article in the Citizen, you could take a picture of gardens in town, and have that so that people can see that, and just another way of showing, that there are a lot of people who are interested and really want to participate in this. So Jennifer has done an amazing amount of work, and it's awesome, and got a couple of people around her, and now we have Kit too. So it's looking pretty good for that.
Very cool.
Janet?
Yeah, I have a question. Have you thought, Jennifer, of working with the local nurseries or flower garden places to carry more native plants?
Yeah, and it's funny because Melinda, I know at some point, we've got so many things, a big long list of things we're doing, and I know one of the things that Melinda had offered to do was go and talk to Ashford Garden Center. First off, because it's a local business, and sort of talk to them about what their practices are. But then, again, whether it's carrying native plants or whether it's just their own practices, are they a pesticide free? Are they friendly to pollinators? Sort of that kind of thing. Having those conversations with them, absolutely. And actually, there is, in terms of locally, Foster Hill Farm actually is up in Stafford. Now, again, not in Ashford, but she contacted us pretty quickly when we got our website up, saying she wanted to do a pollinator talk in I think it's sometime in April. And this is something I'm gonna, in the articles I put out, I'm gonna try to advertise, and on the Facebook page when these talks are occurring. There's free talks going on all the time. And the reason why Foster Hill Farm wants to have that talk, and that's gonna be up in Stafford, up in the community center, is because they're gonna feature native plants. So that's what, like, that business on its own is starting to go in that direction. So I agree, that's another thing to, and that's going to cause a lot of publicity for them. So I think more and more businesses are kind of going to get with the program, but that is something we've thought about just in terms of stuff in Ashford too.
That's exciting to hear, because I know part of the problem has been that all the nurseries stock all these non-native invasive plants. So that is wonderful to hear that.
Yeah.
Christine, you had your hand
Yeah, you
up?
could talk to Hockenham. I forget what they're called now by the training school.
Oh yeah, Tri-County?
Tri-County.
Yeah. He already has some native stuff labeled, but I'm sure he would love to kind of put together a whole table or something.
Actually, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that a whole other aspect I completely forgot to mention is that the other thing is that Melinda and I are also going to monthly meetings that started out as a multi-town collaboration between Mansfield, Wyndham, and Chaplin, and they were working with Joshua Trust. And Loretta put us in touch with them. And since my first meeting with them in October, now we've got Willington, Eastford, Woodstock, a bunch of other towns have joined. And actually, I think Jean DeSmit from Wyndham is working with Tri-County to do exactly what you're talking about, Christine, to get some native plants there. And so I think they're actually working together in collaboration. So it's opened up this whole world. In a sense, we get to find out what all these other towns are doing and collaborate with each other on different projects and agree to show up for each other's events, and also find out precisely somebody is actually already working on that, which is awesome. So yeah, Christine.
What's really cool is that they hire differently abled people, which is it's a really cool place. Second of all, I have goldenrod seeds if you want them.
Oh, Yes, we would. We would. Actually, we've been
No,
going
you
around
know,
picking up.
it's sort of a joke because I have a whole field of goldenrod.
Oh, I see. So you want us to collect them. I get it.
Stephanie,
I, I just wanted to mention, and I don't know what you feel your role would be with sort of individuals, but one place that kind of has made its way into my heart is the fact that our post office has plants in front of it now, and I don't believe that they're necessarily native
They
plants
aren't.
or pollinators, but I wondered if you as a group perhaps could offer your expertise and or free seeds or perhaps free seedlings there, because it's so visible to so
Yeah.
many people. And that whole corridor, actually, as you go down the road, I wonder if other businesses along that road would be interested in perhaps doing some part of the pollinator pathway in front of their businesses, because I don't know who owns the land right next to the road, but it's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
grass.
great idea.
So
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's a whole strip of empty grass.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. It's a great idea. Great idea. I'm making a note of it.
One more thing. So you might contact Stephanie, forget, Goats on the Go. See if she
Oh.
wants to be involved, because I mean, I'm using them because that's a way to get rid of poison ivy without spraying toxic chemicals all over it.
Right. No, I think that's an excellent idea, actually, because I think one of the things we're also talking about is putting together some resource lists. So if people are dealing with invasives, what are some options that don't require chemicals? If people want to know where to get native plants, putting together an up-to-date list of nurseries. That's always the problem, is that nurseries sort of, some of them go in and out of business, but making sure that it's got native plants. So, that's an excellent point.
Plus, they're
Any-
cute.
Oh, yeah. And you
anyone
said,
have any other questions? Okay.
okay, thank you.
Next,
Thank you, Jennifer, for doing all that.
Excellent.
Happy to do it.
next on the agenda is Luther had contacted me and asked to be on our next meeting to talk about what he's doing with his farm and what his plans are and everything. So I thought it would be a really good idea to have him come. But before you start, Luther, there's somebody here, Jason and Dee, and I would just need your last names, if you don't mind, for the attendance.
They're unmuted.
You're unmuted, Jason and Dee.
Hello.
Okay.
You could put your names in the chat. Oh, now they're muted again.
Okay, and there's somebody else. Oh, there's no name.
Waiting for name.
All right, well, let's just get going. And if you could give that to me, you can put it in the chat or whatever. That would be very helpful. So with that, we'll let Luther take the floor and talk with us about what he's doing at his farm. He and Meg, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, folks. So first of all, thanks very much for letting us tell you a little bit about what we hope to do here on the family farm. My name's Luther. This is Meg. We're going to share the communication with you tonight, so you don't have to just listen to me drone on, and it gives me a chance to drink my tea while Meg's talking. So we do have a presentation to share with you, which I'll launch here in a minute if I can get it to work. I did let them know. This is, oh yeah, see. John, is it possible to go ahead and let me share screen? We'll give him a
Yeah,
moment.
sorry. Yes, sorry. I'm sorry. Who is this? Who is speaking?
Luther Brouk.
Okay, I will make you the presenter, Luther. Hang on.
Thank you. And
Okay,
so
you should be able to go
this,
ahead.
okay, I just have to close that out. Oh yeah, entire screen. Sure. Come on. I just had to enable some permissions here, folks. Bear with me. And yeah. Oh, bother. We haven't shared to this format before. So.
Yeah, we're all used to Zoom, which is much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luther, do you see that? Do you see the share button in the?
Yeah, but it's making me change all kinds of system preferences.
Yeah.
And it's going to make me
leave the meeting or?
Okay. I don't know what it wants me to do. I think we're caught in Groundhog's Day.
What is it? Hang on.
What technology is your presentation in?
I'm in Keynote, which is a Mac-based.
So save your Keynote to PowerPoint. You can do that.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably lose a bunch of the formatting is my only worry. I wish it's unfortunate
Well, but at
that we're
least it might
stuck in
play.
this.
John, do you have
Okay.
any advice for them?
I really don't. I'm not sure what
Okay,
how
so
the
we
interface is
will have
on
to
Apple.
we will just have to rejoin you. Bear with us for about 30 seconds.
Good.
Okay. Oh, there's another person that has Melinda, and I don't have Melinda's last name. So if you could put that in your ID thing, that would be helpful. And thank you, Jason and Dee.
I don't see a chat thing here. Oh, there it is, up top. Yeah, there are a lot of new people here tonight. I guess we're being interesting.
You were always interesting.
Thank you, Catherine.
It's Melinda. Oh my God. All right. All's well that ends well. Well, this is probably the biggest meeting we've had.
Ever.
Okay, it looks like we got it, folks. So
we don't see it. Good.
Is everyone seeing the title slide?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. We figured it out. So we'll walk you through the presentation here, just so that everyone's also aware. This is, by and large, the same presentation. We actually invited many of our neighbors from Varga Road and Wormwood Hill to join us here on the farm last Tuesday night, and we were really pleased that the vast majority of people did come to learn about what we're hoping to do. Also, bear with us. We're not professionals at this. We're kind of jumping the gun a little bit doing this presentation because we don't have a formal site plan yet, and we're still trying to knock out some of the details. But we wanted to get information in front of you folks because you'd been presented with some information at your meeting last month that was not entirely accurate. So we wanted to kind of put some of those fears to bed for you, hopefully, and make ourselves available to answer questions. So one of which we can talk about right on the cover slide here is there was quite a bit of well, not quite a bit, but there was some conversation at the last meeting about an image that we had shared with the neighbors that was titled Agbotic Paradise, and there was some I don't know, joking about who's calling this a paradise. And it's quite simply that we're Paradise Farm and they're Agbotic. And it was just a naming convention that I'd utilized when creating the file. So we want to give you a little context about who we are and what we've been doing here. So our family moved to this property in 2010. We're on Wormwood Hill here. We love it here. Dennis, Meg's father, taught economics at UConn for over 40 years, was department head at UConn. He's actively involved with chores every day, loves the farm, loves everything we're doing here. Sylvia is Meg's mother. She is also highly educated, has a PhD in medieval art history. She's involved with all the decisions in terms of what we do here on the farm and the directions we take. Meg has a bachelor's in equine science with honors from UConn. Meg taught high school biology and genetics for Ram High School for 8 years and transitioned away from that when we moved to the farm here so that she could pursue the horse training full time. She's a tremendously well-respected trainer, both locally, regionally, and nationally. She's quite good at what she does.
Thank you. So Luther has a background in construction, agriculture, and project management. He's also dabbled in the vet tech world. He was a vet tech for 5 years. He worked doing mechanic work, so he's got a pretty extensive background. He even worked for a lab up at UConn doing biofuel research years ago. So, and he's done some consulting work as well for people both formally and informally on sort of barn design and construction to best suit their needs and to make properties as efficient as possible.
And, you know, so from a context perspective, you know, we've been here a little over 10 years. We've invested a small fortune into this farm collectively. We've put thousands and thousands of hours into making the farm what it is when you drive by it today. We believe very strongly as a family that farming has to move into production models that are sustainable, regenerative, and support stable food supply chains, minimize carbon miles. Let's stop trucking food from California to the East Coast. And we need to be able to do this in a way that provides living wage jobs for the people that are growing and harvesting the food that we all eat. And it's important to be a responsible member of society. So here's the proposed plan. So we want to partner with Agbotic to grow food year-round in greenhouses. It's going to be organic food. It's going to be just food. So we are also in the midst of transitioning all the other operations of the farm to a fully organic model. We may do some test plots with a little bit of surface farming of fruit and vegetables in addition to the greenhouses. Our current operation as it sits today is about 70 acres of hay, 10 acres of pasture, 30 or so acres of pond. We share that with the abutters. They have a little bit more. And then we've got about 5 or so acres that support our infrastructure back at the main farmyard, the barns, the residents. And then the balance of the acreage is woodland, which gives us a total, it's just over 212 acres. So it's a pretty large landmass. The proposed cluster of greenhouses that we're looking at is also not small, but in the context of the property, we think it fits. So we're 135,800 square feet. That translates to just slightly over 3.12 acres, or about 1.47% of the total property mass.
We do plan to continue all of our other farming operations, including the hay production. I run the horse boarding and training operation that we have here, and we also have a small herd of beef cattle. This is not a corporate takeover of our family farm. We will be running the operation. Luther in particular will be running the greenhouses here. And we actually recruited Agbotic to meet our needs for our family.
Yeah, and to give you a little context about how we found them. So last April, I learned that there was a an application going to Mansfield Planning and Zoning for a very similar project to what we're proposing going in Mansfield. And the location for that happens to have about 70 acres of surface farm and hay production right now. And I was looking for a way to grow our agricultural operation. So I reached out to the person and said, you know, would you have any interest in leasing that hay production to me so that I can double my hay operation? We spoke on the phone. We met in person subsequently, and I got to know a lot more about the person. I got to know a lot more about the project and the technology. And I had an opportunity to go up to the existing farm in New York State back in June of last year. I've been to the farm in New York 5 times now, doing our due diligence, doing our research. I've met many of the members of their board of directors. I've met their farm manager a few times. I've met the people doing the actual work in the greenhouses. We didn't want to just jump into this. We took quite a bit of time. Dennis came with me on one of the trips, and we got a real sense of who the people are, what kind of a work environment they have, what kind of a, people they are anyway. So after all that, that's how we got to the point of saying, yeah, I think we feel comfortable with these people and this is a good fit for us.
And it was really in this past fall that we started exploring the option of doing a greenhouse here as well.
Yeah. So this is a concept drawing. I don't want you to take this as a site plan. This is a concept drawing done by me using the limited resources that I have. But this is what is the starting point for the engineers and the soil scientists to take and evaluate and say, yeah, is this the best utilization of space? Is this the best everything, right? Because we don't want to, we've got so much into this property, we care about it so much, we don't want to do this wrong. So what this drawing on the left is depicting are the 6 greenhouses. You see them all stacked, and you'll see they have an east-west orientation, which is pretty critical because if you can't maintain east-west orientation, you have to supplement with more lighting, and we want to minimize the amount of lighting that we have to utilize. And then you'll see running sort of top to bottom of the screen on the left, it's a little bit challenging to make out, but that's just a utility structure, and that structure houses things like office space for the workers, a workshop, some warehousing, cold storage, right? Because it's fresh produce, you have to keep it cold for FDA compliance, and then there'll be a space for washing and packaging of the food and things like that. You'll see the white delineation for the property line to our east, and you'll see that there's a space of probably about 60 to 80 feet where we will be at a minimum setback for our use to that property line. So we'll be at a 25-foot setback from the property line for that space. This rendering would put us about 485 feet from the residence to the east, and it would put us about 550 feet from the residence to the southwest, which isn't in this photo, but there is one there. And in that photo, Varga Road is right across the very bottom of that rendering. Top right just shows you an elevation on a 3D model. So it shows 52-foot wide greenhouses, and it shows 25-foot spacing between the greenhouses. We can't go any closer or else we have a shading effect from one greenhouse shading the next greenhouse over. If we could go closer and minimize our footprint more, we would, but we also have to allow some space in between for water infiltration and things like that. The bottom photo is just another elevation that shows the long side of the greenhouses along with the utility structures next to them. So this is something else we wanted to just make sure everyone had a chance to see, because I don't know how many people actually have looked and seen what the state defines agriculture to be.
All right, so it's a bit of a long one, but I'll try to read it quickly because there's a lot in here, and I think it's important that people understand what agriculture is. So it's except as otherwise And let me just say what we have underlined is what we feel like we are either doing here currently or would be doing with this practice, right? Not all of this pertains to us, but what we have underlined does. So except as otherwise specifically defined, the words agriculture and farming include cultivation of the soil, dairying, forestry, raising or harvesting any agricultural or horticulture commodity, including the raising, shearing, feeding, caring for, training, and management of livestock, including horses, bees, the production of honey, poultry, fur-bearing animals and wildlife, and the raising or harvesting of oysters, clams, mussels, other molluscan shellfish or fish, the operation, management, conservation, improvement or maintenance of a farm and its buildings, tools and equipment, or salvaging timber or cleared land of brush or other debris left by a storm as an incident to such farming operations, the production or harvesting of maple syrup or maple sugar, or any agriculture commodity, including lumber, as an incident to ordinary farming operations, or the harvesting of mushrooms, the hatching of poultry, or the construction, operation, or maintenance of ditches, canals, reservoirs, or waterways used exclusively for farming purposes, handling, planting, drying, packing, packaging, processing, freezing, grading, storing, or delivering to storage or to market, or to carrier for transportation to market, or for direct sale, any agricultural or horticultural commodity as an incident to ordinary farming operations, or in the case of fruits and vegetables, as an incident to the preparation of such fruits or vegetables for market or for direct sale. The term farm includes farm buildings and accessory buildings thereto, nurseries, orchards, ranges, greenhouses, hoop houses, and other temporary structures or other structures used primarily for the raising and as an incident to ordinary farming operations, the sale of agricultural or horticultural commodities. The term agriculture and farming do not include the cultivation of cannabis as defined in Section 1 of this Act. The term aquaculture means the farming of the waters of the state and tidal wetlands and the production of protein food, including fish, oysters, clams, mussels, and other molluscan shellfish on leased, franchised, and public underwater farmlands. Nothing herein shall restrict the power of local zoning authority under Chapter 124.
And sort of as Meg talked about the takeaways from this page for us, the items that are underlined towards the top of this statute include things that we're currently doing. The middle section that's underlined, we're doing a couple of those things. Hay is an agricultural commodity, but the bulk of that is our expansion into producing food. And it's important to understand that, and this is something not everyone understands, that agriculture and farming does not include cultivation of cannabis. We have been overwhelmed with the amount of misinformation that's out there that somehow we are putting in a massive cannabis farm here. We are not. We have no intention of that. We don't have any licensing with the state for cannabis. Ashford wouldn't even qualify for a large-scale cannabis operation once the licenses are granted. Our population would only sustain a micro grow operation, which again, we have no interest in. We don't have any licenses for hemp. It's not something we're looking at. So I just wanted to reiterate that. So let's talk about the partner a little bit. So this is the partner. This is what the Agbotic farm in New York looks like. It doesn't look at all like warehousing or anything like that.
This is their only existing farm currently.
Correct. And so the concept drawing that you just saw from us looks different than this. And that's because we're requiring them to make some changes to the standard model because it fits our farm better to make some changes. So instead of having a center building with greenhouses on either side, we're going to put greenhouses all down one side of a connector building. It fits our land better. We're working with engineers to change the design from a round top greenhouse to a gable peaked greenhouse. My personal thought, and it bears out, it looks like, is that by doing a flyover peak on the greenhouses where one roof line is a little higher than the other, we can have some vertical ventilation at the top of the greenhouse and get some passive venting, cutting down on our need for vent fans and electricity. So we're trying to be smart about how we take what they can bring and then ask for improvements and changes.
And it also lowers the height.
Yeah, it does. Good point, Meg. So these are about 30-foot tall greenhouses. We're targeting between 20 and 25 feet for our peak height on the ones that'll go here. So this is what they look like inside. Top left, you can see the full soil bed, all tilled up, ready for planting. You'll see there's a shade cloth that's over the top of the soil. It's midsummer, so you actually have to shade the crops from the sunlight a little bit midsummer. Bottom left shows the gantry and shows the tool head on the gantry. Now the gantry is sort of what you might think of as, in the field it would be a tractor, but in a greenhouse, for lack of a better defined term, it's kind of like the indoor tractor. So it runs all the implements. It runs the tiller for tillage. It runs soil bed shaping, planting, harvesting, irrigation, all the functions that are needed in the greenhouse. The heavy lifting is done by the gantry. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see that's a greenhouse in full production. I think this one had baby arugula and some baby kale and some, I want to say, radishes growing in it. And you'll see that the gantry is irrigating as it goes down this one here. So that's what the inside of these look like. Again, it's not industrial. It's soil. It's growing plants in soil. It's completely organic, and it's pretty awesome. It smells amazing in there. So this slide kind of gets to a little bit of why this kind of farming we think is the right kind of farming to be doing. So this gives you your different methods of growing food. So far left, you've got organic soil outdoor farming. And then you've got pros and cons, right? So you've seasonal use, but there's no synthetic fertilizers, no chemical pesticides, no chemical herbicides. There's carbon drawdown. There's low cost, relatively low cost inputs with a moderate cost of food per pound. And it is healthy for people, healthy for the planet. You can grow anything that you can cultivate, right? Outdoor soil, conventional. Again, you're seasonal. You are, unfortunately, yes to all the things that we're trying to move away from. There's not really a carbon drawdown. There's some higher cost inputs, partly because of all the chemicals that are being thrown in. It has a very low cost of food per pound because of all of the other inputs that are utilized. And you know, there's negatives to this, right? We know the negatives to some of the conventional outdoor farming. This is where it gets interesting, right? So Dutch glass or hydroponic greenhouses, this was really pioneered in the Netherlands. This is what the vast majority of greenhouse vegetable growers are doing, especially if they're not growing in soil, they're growing hydroponically. So it's year-round. It has sunlight, it has supplemental light, heat, water for hydroponics. These are pretty well proven in the marketplace. They have reasonable economics. They're not likely to fail. Unfortunately, yes, they're using synthetic fertilizers. Hydroponic is not organic. It's a misnomer. People think hydroponics are organic. They are not. To be organic, you must grow food in soil. So the way that they get the nutrients into the food that's grown hydroponically is to provide them a chemical bath or substrate or slurry that has all those nutrients suspended in them. There's actually some data that suggests that the food grown hydroponically is not as nutrient complete as food that's grown in soil. No carbon drawdown, fairly energy intense, fairly high cost of food per pound. So again, higher nitrate levels in the food, things like that. So vertical hydroponic or aeroponic. Now, these are the buildings that we were compared to pretty extensively in the presentation that you were given. This is not anything we're doing. This is year-round growing without any sunlight. It's all artificial light, a lot of energy inputs. Hydroponics, like we said, is growing food in a water bath. Aeroponics is where you actually have exposed rootstock and the roots are misted with that same sort of nutrient-laden water, right? So yes, still synthetic fertilizers, no pesticides or herbicides, chemically based, no carbon drawdown, really energy intense. We don't like it for those reasons. Massive cost of food per pound, not a really great place to be investing money. You see a lot of investment going into these companies right now because they're very buzzword. But it's not actually you're already starting to see failures. So that's why we don't want to invest our time and put our property on the line for something that we don't think is going to be successful. That brings us to the agbotic technology. So growing food and soil, fully organic. We're year round. So if you have to build all the washing and packaging facilities to be FDA compliant, it's nice if you can utilize them more than 4 to 6 months a year to help offset those costs. So year-round growing. We're supplementing light. We're supplementing heat. We are irrigating with water. We're using no synthetic fertilizers, no chemicals. We're drawing down carbon. The New York Green Bank has estimated that the first farm in New York offsets 5,300 tons of carbon annually. So it's a solution we can believe in. It's something that gives us some metrics in terms of year-round production that allows us to keep people employed year-round and feed people year-round. And we really think it's the best solution that's available for farming. Not just here, but I think personally in general, this is a really smart way to farm and grow food close to where it needs to be consumed. The statistics, so initial construction include the 6 greenhouses that we showed on the concept drawing. They're fairly large. They're 18,720 square feet each. That's 52 by 360. So there's the potential to expand up to 10. We're only starting with 6. We're going to see how things go. There's been some misinformation in the ether floating around that we're doing 3 to 6 football fields worth of greenhouses. So 3 greenhouses would actually fit on 1 football field. Just again, it helps to build some context. Utility structure to house washing and packaging, warehousing, office space, workshop, and utilities. That's about 23,480. So this was another big thing I wanted to correct. During your presentation, you were told that we were going to be consuming 2 megawatts of power a day. That's really off. I don't know where that number was generated from, but that is very, very far from our actuals. We're planning for a peak load of 640 kilowatts. We think there's a chance we could actually get that under 500 kilowatts. We've been trying to come up with innovative ways to use less power. To offset power consumption, we're going to do a roof-mounted solar array on the utility building. And we're going to do some testing with an agrivoltaic solar installation. That's where you have some ground-mounted panels, but you continue to farm under them. There are certain crops that really thrive in a semi-shaded environment. So we want to test that. I want to experiment with that a little bit. And we're looking into the possibilities of a hydrogen fuel cell. Again, we're just trying to be creative. We don't have any definitive plans on this part yet, but we're talking to all the smart people. Water consumption lands us around 4,500 gallons a day peak. For the context, this farm used to have 100 cow dairy on it. The 4,500 gallons a day is less water than the 100 cow dairy would have used. A mature cow milking drinks about 50 gallons of water a day just for drinking water. Add in all of the wash water and cooling water and all the other things that go along with a dairy operation. That would have been significantly more than what we're going to be using. And understand that the way we're doing this, we're using 90% less water than what would be for irrigation on surface farming, the same amount of land. So we're doing the best we can on water consumption. There's a good chance we're going to heat and cool with geothermal wells. We've had some folks doing some studies for us on this. It looks like a really promising way to minimize energy inputs and be smart about burning fuels, right? We want to move away from burning propane and things like that wherever we can. If we have to supplement heat with propane furnaces, we're actually going to scrub the heavy toxins out of that exhaust gas and release that exhaust gas right into the greenhouses so that the plants can utilize the exhaust gases for growth. Designed to be carbon negative, as I mentioned, the first farm in New York is 52 to 5,300 tons of carbon offset.
Okay, so why our farm? Why do we want to do this here, right? So there's the desire for us to innovate and pursue agriculture, and I also think it's important to note that I'm sure, since most of you guys are, all of you guys are environmentalists, um, you're aware that a lot of our food is grown on the West Coast, right? A lot of our fruit and vegetables are brought here from out west and from California. California is essentially, it's going to be out of water. It's getting more and more difficult to farm out there because of the lack of water, and then the cost and the carbon miles of bringing food across the country. And so much of our food supply is really dependent on the backs of really poorly paid migrant immigrant workers. And so we truly believe there needs to be a different way to farm in this country. And Agbotic, we think, is a solution to this. So we're really excited about that, and being able to be part of that. So, and our farm is a good location for it. So we have the desire to do it here, but we also have a good space for it. All right, the east-west orientation is critical for the greenhouses to minimize the supplemental lighting, and we have the ability to orient them in that manner. It would provide our community with local year-round organic food, approximately about 6,000 or more pounds per month, and I think that's per greenhouse, right? So that's a lot of fresh food that we can grow, and we can grow it year-round. It will provide our community with expanded tax base, and probably about a dozen good-paying jobs, anywhere from 10 to 15. That's a little uncertain exactly, but about a dozen jobs will be created from this farm. We have non-contaminated soils for growing food. We have abundant water here. We have the pond on the farm, Leander Pond, excuse me, and then we're also abut Knowlton Pond. So we're kind of surrounded by water here. Water has never really been a problem for us on the farm. We have the potential for the surface farm expansion. So if we decide to move beyond the greenhouses, because it is quite a large farm for Connecticut, then we're able to take the growing operation a little bit outside if we decide to do that. We're close to UConn. Both Luther and I went to UConn. My dad was a professor there. My mom actually went to UConn as well. So there's quite a bit of potential for education. And I know the university is really excited about the possibility of having a farm nearby. We have about 10 million people within a 90-mile radius for low carbon miles on food. So we kind of think of ourselves as being quite rural here, but there are quite a few people within our reach that we can provide food to. Our property is limited to only agriculture. We're going to talk about that in just a moment, but we cannot do anything commercial with our farm. And so we can only do agricultural development, and this falls within that.
Yeah, and like Meg said, it's important to us that we address the challenges of modern food production in terms of, the farms on the West Coast are being depleted of water and resources. If anybody buys the Annie's Organics or things like that,
Annie's are local.
No, Annie's is distributed out of Massachusetts.
That's Olivia's.
I'm sorry, Olivia's. Oh, I get it wrong. Olivia's is distributed out of Massachusetts and makes it look like it's local, but Olivia's is actually grown in California and shipped over here. So we want to do better than that. So let's talk a little bit about our expected environmental impact. Okay, water is something we've heard concerns about, and we've heard some potentially misleading information about. So let's look at this. So the area we're talking about building on sees, in Ashford, we see an average of 49.8 inches of rain per year. So that 3.12 acres would see just over 4 million gallons of rainfall per year. So our annual water consumption on the farm. So when I say 4,500 gallons a day of water consumption, it's important to understand we don't run watering when we're not present to observe it, and we don't plan on running a 7-day-a-week operation. So we'll be watering only 5 days a week. Potential for 6 days a week, I suppose, if it really proved necessary, but I think we're likely to be only 5 days a week. So that puts us at 1.17 million gallons a year. The outdoor equivalent would be 10 times that much if we were trying to irrigate for vegetables in that large land mass. And for context, there's a paper that was put out by the University of California Extension Program talking about hay and pasture ground and how much water it takes per acre. And their numbers are that it takes between 800,000 and 1 million gallons of water to get an acre of pasture or hay ground through a 6-month growing cycle. So, the hay field that's where this proposed location will be is currently consuming, almost 2.5 to a little over 3 million gallons of water a year per what the University of California has been able to determine. So if that is borne out, then we're actually reducing our water consumption by moving to our vegetable production. And it's important to understand that in terms of wetlands impact, we're not capturing any of that almost 2 million gallons of rainwater. We're not capturing that. That's going to be collected and discharged at a rate very close to the pre-disturbance rate. That's part of our stormwater management plan, is make sure we don't discharge water too quickly to overwhelm things or cause erosion, but all that water is being redischarged and allowed to flow to where it would have flowed anyway, which is the wetlands, so that we can fully support the hydrological cycle of the wetlands. And if that means that that water gets infiltrated deeper into the ground to recharge groundwater, or if that means that it flows across Varga and down to Leander Pond and further on down into the reservoir for Willimantic, however it is currently being done, that's what's going to continue happening. We're not disturbing the wetlands, we're not filling in wetlands, we're not doing anything to impact the wetlands. Sound was discussed recently. We're going to have some minimal sound from fans. The sound output from the greenhouses was measured at 250 feet from the greenhouses to be 47.7 to 50.1 decibels. Normal conversation is about 60 decibels. We don't anticipate an odor impact. Any of our soil amendments that we're going to be using, and we'll list out some of them here in a second, they're all organic. They're all stored inside, so we're not doing outdoor storage of anything. For light impact, we're running full horizontal and full vertical blackout shades. They're 99% effective. We can all see Yukon glowing from wherever we live. Well, at least we can. We're on the sort of southwestern side of Ashford. We can see Yukon lighten up the sky clear as day. We're not going to be that. We can see Extramart from our house lighten up the sky. We're not going to be that.
Well, and I think it's important to note too that they're not going to be lit 24 hours a day. There's been some misconception that the lights will be on all the time. The goal is to mimic essentially, your summer solstice around June 20th. And so on bright sunny days, there will be no lights on. And then during the winter months, the lights will run, in the morning and evening to mimic those longer days. But as soon as it's at all dark outside or dusk, the blackout shades go into effect. So you will not see any of the lights in the greenhouses.
Correct. Good point. Again, because we're moving to an indoor farming model, there's no nutrient runoff. So we're actually being really good in terms of our potential impact to our waterways and things like that. And again, just to remind everybody, this is a fully carbon negative plan. So we're almost there. We're almost to the end, guys. Hang in there with us. We're trying to go quickly, but not skip stuff. We've heard some concerns. We've talked to the neighbors. Like I said, we presented to the neighbors. We've heard concerns about traffic. So again, probably 10 or 12 vehicles a day for employees. Some of those are going to be us. We already live here. We already drive the roads. We anticipate 2 Sprinter vans. Those are sort of like what you see. Some of the FedEx trucks are those. The Amazon Prime trucks are those. And then one like UPS size box truck or like a Thompson's general store size box truck for distribution. Customers will not be picking up. We will be delivering everything. So we will have full control over the drivers, which means we can set rules, we can set guidance for them that they must be respectful and good neighbors, and then we can address that if we have issues. We're looking really closely at trying to do a fully electric fleet, again, to minimize carbon inputs. And then deliveries coming to the site are going to be things like consumables, so packaging, so bulk bags or boxes, clamshells, things like that, or the soil amendments to add back into the earth, or seeds.
Construction traffic, there will be some traffic during the construction months. We're, I think they're hoping for about a 6-month build out.
Yeah.
But there'll be limited duration, with efforts to minimize disruption to the neighbors as best we can.
Yeah, and we'll be using local people as much as we can for things like this. People like the Knights or people that know our community and kind of treat the community properly. We've heard claims that we're going to pave Varga Road. We're not going to pave Varga Road. We have no right to ask for Varga Road to be paved. And if there's a negative impact because of our project, we'll talk to Joe, we'll talk to the Board of Selectmen, we'll come up with a plan for how to address them. Power, again, nowhere near the 2 megawatts per day. We're looking at renewable power to offset consumption. We will likely bring 3-phase power up the road. That'll look exactly like the power distribution lines on Cushman look right now, which probably no one's ever noticed because they don't look like anything ugly. And if we have changes in the power supply, none of those costs will be dumped on the neighbors. That's something that the project will fund. We were asked questions about byproducts and trash. The byproducts of our operation are organic food waste, right? So if we have a product that overmatures and it won't meet the spec of the end user, and we can't find someone to give it to so that they can eat it, we will compost it. We expect a very small volume of this. It doesn't make a lot of sense for us to be growing food that can't be given to people to eat. Any trash products, we're going to be recycling, composting, or disposing of properly in accordance with, all the laws, regulations, best practices. We touched on this briefly, that heating and cooling, we're going to be looking at doing through geothermal wells. We are not going to be running a 24-hour-a-day operation. There's no on-site guards. We've heard that. There's no 24-hour lighting. As we mentioned, there's blackout shades. Crops. We're going to grow fully organic microgreens, arugula, beets, kale, and radishes in soil. That's the model that currently exists. If there's customers near us in our reach that want other things, we can grow anything that can be grown in soil. So whatever that may be, we will figure it out. We don't have any permits to grow hemp. We're not looking at hemp. Water, as we mentioned, 4,500 gallon a day average. Anything we use for wash water or getting things ready for packaging, we're going to capture all of that water and filter it and reuse it for irrigation so that it's not just wasted water. And then we wanted to touch briefly on the notion of preserved land, because this came up some during your meeting as well, that there was the perception that somehow people are taking an advantage by having property conserved or preserved, and then circling back and doing a larger scale agricultural production under the premise of tax advantage. And our deed restriction is with an organization called Connecticut Farmland Trust. They're part of a larger national organization called American Farmland Trust. They're aware of our plans. They have no opposition to it. They're quite excited about it, actually, because they think it proves that conservation doesn't necessarily mean you can't innovate. The town of Ashford and the state have absolutely no money tied up in terms of buyout of rights or anything like that with our property. And realistically, even if our farm was not conserved, the taxes that the property pays to the town would effectively be the same, because the land is in something called PA 490, which is a state program that allows for a reduction in property taxes on agricultural production land. So conserved or not conserved, if anybody takes advantage of PA 490, that's what really sets the tax base for a property. From a viewscape perspective, the proposed site's about 500 feet from the road. It's a little under 500 feet from the house, the residence to our east, and it's over 500 feet from the house to our southwest.
So we were quite disappointed to find ourselves being portrayed in such negative terms by our neighbors.
And I was disappointed. We would have loved to have been a part of the meeting last month and actually participate in the initial presentation. We made offers to both Claudia and Bruce and Steve and Mary to provide more information. So I'm really grateful that we're here tonight getting you that information. And I was a little taken aback, because it really seemed like by the end of that presentation, the commission had really made up their mind that the things we were doing here were bad. And I think it's important for you to get the information from us as well as the abutters that are opposed to what we're doing. Because the information that was presented was incomplete, often incorrect, and was really cherry-picked to portray our project in terrible light, it's understandable, I think, that the commission would come to some of those outcomes, right? Because you weren't given the benefit of a total portrayal of what we're actually trying to do here.
We have a track record of over 10 years on the farm that shows constant investment and improvement. Pretty much we get wonderful feedback from people driving by and up until recently the neighbors that we've done really good things with the farm. We've continually reduced negative environmental impact. We've transitioned our farm over to all hay production. We no longer have the fields in corn that we're getting sprayed with Roundup, and we have actually, stopped doing any kind of pesticide or chemical use on the farm now as of this year, as we're moving fully organic. So we don't feel that should be dismissed out of hand.
Yeah, and we've heard some informal information. We haven't seen anything formally submitted yet, but we've been told that it sounds like the neighbors are looking at ways to further restrict regulations on farms in town and sort of undermine the rights of farms in town to grow and diversify and be innovative. And I think it's really important that all the commissions in town support farms' abilities to innovate, move towards regenerative practices, and feed people locally without having to truck food cross country. Some corrections, there were some communication things that were discussed at the last meeting that were incorrect. There were some times that, that people were saying we discovered, and the discovery was by us. We took it upon ourselves to reach out, provide information. I spent over an hour presenting this project up in the field to our abutters to the east. We haven't tried to hide anything. We wanted to start this process of dialogue early so that if there were concerns or there were things that were requests or asks of the neighbors, that we could see if there's a way that our design could accommodate those requests, right? So we tried really early and often to engage and listen and be informative. There was discussion that we were going to be putting a power plant on the farm. We're not doing that. There's been claims made that the tax abatement language that the Ag Commission was working on were developed specifically for this project. That's completely not the case. You were told about a gentleman named Dr. Cotterill in your previous meeting and his recommendations that this is not an economically viable way to farm and that we should continue trucking food from the West Coast as we've done for the last couple decades. A, I believe he's wrong, but B, he's not an independent expert or an independent consultant. He's an abutter to the project in Mansfield, and that's why he's in opposition to this.
And let me remind you that my father was an economics professor at UConn for 43 years, so and is fully supportive of this project. So there are different views in the economics of it, but
there's not. I mean, the economics are actually quite good, but Dr. Cotterill doesn't want it because he lives next to where the farm in Mansfield is. So you have to understand the context of his stance. He is one of the 4 people suing the town of Mansfield over the permit that Mansfield issued. And it's important to understand that lawsuit was discussed at your last meeting as well, and that, oh geez, Ashford should be careful because they're going to find themselves sued like Mansfield. Again, the only reason Mansfield is seeing a lawsuit and the only reason Ashford would have even the potential of seeing a lawsuit would be from abutters trying to say that we shouldn't be able to do this. We've touched on this. This is a family-driven project. We're not being overrun by an outside corporate entity. I'm going to run the whole thing. We're not trying to pursue changes in town regulations. This is very much not industrial or factory-based. We heard the term factory farming thrown around quite a bit. You've seen the inside of the greenhouses. They're not factories. They're not industrial. It's soil. It's food. We're not filling wetlands. We talked about our height targets. You were shown some slides that were terribly misleading about disturbed area. If you had to move a 3-acre farm building out to disturbing 10 acres of soil, then you're managing things terribly. That's not at all the area of impact that we expect. And you know, there was talk about digging down 20 or more feet to do these things. We're not doing any of that. We care a tremendous amount about this property. We wouldn't do anything to it that's nearly as terrible as what you've been told we're doing. The process for this, we as a family kind of decided that this was a good move last October, and we started seriously looking into the regulations to make sure we would be in compliance. We didn't start, the thing that started last April is I learned of the company last April, but we didn't start this in any meaningful way until about October. We kind of settled on it. There's been some conversation that we're going to be doing a massive compost operation with chicken manure like what was done down at the mushroom farm, and it's going to stink out the whole neighborhood. The chicken manure we're using currently is actually for our surface farm operation. It's what we're fertilizing the hay fields with. One, to be able to move towards organic surface farming, and two, because you cannot afford to buy any other kind of fertilizer anymore. It's prohibitive. The greenhouse soil health, we're going to manage it with compost, some coconut hull, kelp meal, alfalfa meal, worm castings, biochar, and other organic amendments depending on what the soil samples look like. So because we'll do soil samples monthly and amend the soil as necessary. We wanted to just show you this. Some of you may have already seen this document. It's being circulated in town. I don't know if it's being circulated outside of town. It's terribly misleading. It's almost entirely just misinformation. It uses a lot of triggering words like industrial and factory, and
claims we're growing cannabis.
Claims we're growing cannabis. Claims we're using 2 megawatts a day per power, and that somehow this will destroy the conservation values, viability, and productivity of the farmlands, open space, and soils forever. And in reality, it's tremendously viable and it increases our productivity, and it's entirely keeping with regenerative, carbon negative organic farming. So we've seen this going around. This was written by our neighbors and being circulated by them. The website listed on the sheet appears to be a privately held website. The last time I tried to go on it, it's not even built out yet, but it doesn't actually appear to be any legitimate organization. It seems to just be a means for getting propaganda against us out. And the article it's referencing was published in Neighbors, and it was written by Claudia Urson, who is the abutter to the east. And again, it's not an unbiased representation of what we're doing, what Agbotic is doing, or what the evolution of controlled environment agriculture is. It's a biased opinion against, written by someone who is very opposed to our farm evolving and taking its next steps. So in closing, we made it. Thank you guys all for sticking in there. We wanted to show you this, that, so Mansfield had this same type of farm presented to them. And again, you're your own commission, but I wanted to give you this context that the Mansfield Conservation Commission determined that that project is not likely to have a significant impact. And they voted on that unanimously and passed it unanimously. So the Connecticut Department of Ag, Yukon College of Ag, Connecticut Farm Bureau, and every Mansfield board and commission, including zoning, wetlands, conservation, agriculture, economic development, all support and approve this kind of project. The only resistance this project has seen either in Mansfield or here in Ashford is from abutting property owners that don't understand that we can't continue doing antiquated farming practices. Connecticut Farmland Trust holds the deed restriction on the farm, as we mentioned. They're aware of our plans, and these are just 2 direct quote excerpts from our conservation grant, that the primary purpose is to protect the agricultural soils, agricultural viability, and agricultural productivity and perpetuity. We feel strongly that this project is going to really do those things. And in Article 5.5, it specifically says that we retain the right to conduct commercial activities associated with forestry activities, farming activities, and or recreational activities. And, you know, we moved here after Bill Parody had already passed away, but, you know, we've talked with the people at Connecticut Farmland Trust. He was very involved with writing the language of this deed. And we've talked with people that knew Bill, and we feel that if Bill was with us today and he knew about what we're trying to do and the direction we're trying to take the land in and the way we're trying to grow food and have community impact and be able to feed the school systems and do educational programs with school children from, you know, middle school, elementary school, all the way up through college, we think he would feel pretty darn good about what we're trying to do here.
We will continue to follow all applicable regulations and laws. We have no intentions of trying to change any of the existing regulations in town or at the state level. And I think that's about it. If you guys have any specific recommendations or concerns, we haven't put you all to sleep. We've been looking at our presentation here and haven't seen you guys, so we will
I'm going to stop
sharing
and
join the group.
There's still people here.
They're still here.
That's a bit of a shock. So yeah, I mean, questions, concerns, suggestions. One thing that actually jumps to mind before we open up, I meant to mention this, is I know you guys run the farmers market, and we've had questions about impact to the farmers market. And I think that the best thing to do there is to talk to the vendors, because if there's something we can do to contribute to people coming to the market to buy products that we have available that the other local producers don't have, then that's probably a responsible path for us to take, is to try to contribute to drawing people to the market. If the perception is that we're going to overwhelm or somehow negatively impact the people that have already been doing this for some time, then it's certainly not our intention to come into the farmers market and try to overwhelm the people that have been successful there for all these years.
Well, thank you, Luther and Meg. That was quite informative presentation. Yeah, I had a question about where is your thought about selling the greens or whatever you're growing?
Good question. So we're looking at groceries, of course. So we're looking at things like Price Chopper, Big Y, Stop and Shop, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, any of the markets that have distribution centers within reach of us. So the way we're able to manage all that distribution with few vehicles is we're not going to be going to actually every single store. They have their own distribution network. We just have to get the product to wherever they distribute from. So like the farm in New York has recently done a deal with a pretty large national chain. They're not going to all 90 stores that they're serving. They're going to one distribution center. That distribution center covers 90 stores. We also hope to be able to provide food to the local school systems. We want to be able to provide food to UConn. UConn, when they're at max capacity, they're serving about 220,000 meals a week. So we feel like UConn has an edict to support local agriculture. We're fairly local to them. The Mansfield farm would also probably supply them some food. And then it's things like restaurant distributors. So things like the Cisco's or the Baldors that do distribution to restaurant businesses. Yeah. Does that get to your question, Loretta?
Yeah, that's a good, yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yes, Loretta.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have actually several. So Luther, you give us a timeline sort of starting in October and April, and yet at the Board of Selectmen meeting, several times you said there are no concrete plans, there is no project. So I think that's why the secretive aspect has come up, because you kind of made it be a secret. And I'm not sure why you're saying that's everybody else's fault. So,
No, so that's a fair question, and thanks for that. And so I kind of spoke to this a little bit right at the start of our presentation, where I said that, it's true that we don't actually have any finalized plans.
There's no permit.
It's true that we haven't applied for a permit yet. So when people at the Board of Selectmen were speaking in opposition to our project, we were caught very off guard because we hadn't yet applied for a permit. We don't have all of our final site plans in place. And one of the things that I'm always concerned about is when you do a presentation like this, or when you do a presentation of any scale, and you don't have your final plans and you don't have your ready for application numbers, if you have to come back and revise because the engineers determined that you were wrong on something, then the public perception becomes, well, they told us they were doing this and now they said they're doing this, and so they're liars. And so I was concerned about that dialogue developing, that if we came out with I'm less than entirely comfortable presenting what we've done tonight, because there's the chance that things will continue to change when we get our input finished from the engineers and from the soil scientists. But our timeline has been accelerated because other people are saying things that are very inaccurate.
okay, but you understand why you helped create that perception.
Well,
okay.
I don't know that. Yeah, go for it.
Can I just go on? So, I'd like to know how many agbotic farms there are, how many have been successful, and how many have failed. And what happens if you build this very large thing and you don't make a go of it? You've now covered 3-4 acres with concrete and glass and stuff that has to be dealt with, and there's no use for it maybe. So what happens if you aren't able to make this work? You put a lot of stuff on top of really fertile, beautiful farmland. And you say that, yeah, maybe agriculture has to change, but when we cover things up, like the whole Connecticut River Valley, maybe it's only 3 acres at a time, but it's chip, 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 chip away, and all the farmland's gone. And that really distresses me.
I can answer that, and that's a good question. And I would say that the caveat to covering the river valley up is that a lot of that went commercial and we're still growing food. So there's one current full functioning farm for agbotic. It's in New York. We have had tremendous transparency and access to their operating numbers. They've been very upfront. We've required them to be very upfront with the projected viability of an operation like this. It looks exceptionally good. We do not anticipate failure. That being said, things happen, things go wrong. So one of the things we're doing in this partnership is we are requiring that we establish I think it's going to probably be a bond of funds, so that if in 5 years time, 10 years time, this modality is no longer the correct fit, or this doesn't work, we want to sever the partnership, there will be funds that have already been set aside that will pay for the decommissioning of the greenhouses. Now there's no glass, it's all, it's actually a thermal
Plastic.
double wall plastic that covers it. Has a very long lifespan. And we will have funds in place to take all the buildings back down to ground. So we won't be left with buildings that are not being utilized. And again, remember, we live here too, right? This is not something we want to see as an eyesore or see as something that is not good for the property.
Okay, one more. Let me have one more question. So you have said several times it's not industrial. Well, if you're only employing 12 people and you have this big kind of robotic arm that's kind of doing everything, that's actually pretty industrial. And my question is, if you were going to be really good, you might employ lots more people and pay them well,
Yeah, but
So,
instead of having it be robotic.
So I mean, that's not so much a question as a statement, but I'll take it as a question. And so, in the scheme of agriculture, being able to cover a greenhouse of this size with one person is not at all industrial. I mean, there's farms all over the country that are covering thousands of acres with one person. They're growing corn and wheat, and they're using a ton of chemicals. That's the difference. We think that by utilizing the technology that's come available, it lets us employ that one person at a great wage. If we were employing 30 people instead of a dozen, the wages would be half. It wouldn't be a living wage, and we wouldn't be doing anybody the justice that they deserve for the work they're putting in.
Which is why most of the surface operations, the farm labor is very poorly paid, because farms are not going to be economically viable if they pay good living wages to their workers, right? It just, the numbers don't work. And I think as far as, it's important not to mix up technology with industrial, right? Technology is a huge part of farming operations all over, whether they are more industrial or not.
Yeah, Yukon has a dairy herd up there, and they're milking those dairy cows with robots. The cows decide, I think I want to get milked, and they walk over to the robots. The robots are fully autonomous. The cow walks in, the machine reads the transponder on the cow, says, oh, you're this number. Your production numbers have been great. I'm going to give you a little bit more feed while you're standing here being milked. And then that robotic milker is sampling the milk output of the cow in real time for protein levels, fat levels, looking for white blood cell counts to see if it's got infections. All these things are pretty commonplace in agriculture. Technology has really become a really important, critical tool for agriculture.
As have chemicals.
Which we're not using.
Which we're not using.
Right.
We have Rose?
I don't know if I understood you correctly. First of all, that was a wonderful presentation, and I personally appreciate it. But did I understand you correctly when you said that even after the greenhouses are built, that you would, because of the agricultural designation, that your annual property taxes would be the same?
No, so thank you for that, Rose, because that's, I'm sorry I wasn't clear on that. So anything that gets added to the property would, of course, add to the tax rolls, right? So under the current, so the land mass, so things that don't have buildings on them, things that haven't been touched, that would all continue along at the same whatever assessed value that the assessor has on it. Mm-hmm. The assessor would come out and determine an assessed value for everything for the greenhouses, and then that would be what the tax bill is. I don't know, I don't have projections as to what that would be, but it would probably be a fairly significant contribution to the town's tax base because it's a fairly robust farm.
Would you be asking for tax exemptions for the greenhouses and the robotics?
So I don't know what exemptions exist for the robotics. I know that Ashford currently has a $100,000 exemption per building for agricultural use that we, in full disclosure, we do currently meet that. You have to show $15,000 of activity annually and then apply through the town assessor's office for that abatement. We currently do that with all of the farm buildings that we have. My expectation is that that would also be applied to the greenhouses. However, that would still leave probably quite a lot on the taxes.
And do you plan to have any kind of retail outlet store for the residents of Ashford?
We've had that question as well. We talked briefly with the EDC the other night, and they asked the same question. And the current zoning regulations, that would be a special permit to have a retail store on the farm. So it's not something we're looking at this point. The farm in Mansfield already has a farm store on its location, and the products would be available at the Red Barn Creamery store for local purchase. We also hope to be in all of the local groceries as well, so that the products would be available there. But at this point, we're going to be pretty busy just getting the growing operation going, and I don't know that we have the bandwidth to take on a retail shop as well.
And I guess my last question, because you've answered about 50 that I had. How do you feel this benefits Ashford?
Oh, so Meg can probably speak to this as well, but so we've moved here in 2010. Some of you probably recognize me from various meetings and things. I mean, I'm a big believer that the community you live in, you have to spend your time in, right? So I moved to town. I immediately got on meetings and started learning about the town. I've been to affordable housing conference workshops. I've been to Our Town, Our Future meetings. I've served on planning and zoning, served on the Agriculture Commission. It's really important to me that when you live in a place, you impact that place positively however you can. You be civically engaged, be a responsible citizen. So that is kind of the undertone for how I perceive our impact in the town. So I perceive this as being available to partner with education, great impact, contributing to tax base, it's good impact, real decent living wage jobs right in town. There's not a lot of people that are growing any operations in town doing that. And I think that, from a grander scheme, if the EDC can leverage what we're doing a little bit to let people know that we're doing some really smart farming things in Ashford, it kind of puts Ashford on the map for people that want to do something up at the technology development zone up on 84, or do something at the wagon shed property on 44. Kind of you could envision how people would see what we're doing and understand that we're having impact. I don't know if that was a reasonable enough answer or not. I tend to get a little rambly, so I'm sorry.
Well, my concern, of course, is that you're really talking only 12 jobs. And I was
But a
hoping
lot
that,
of food.
but
A lot
yeah,
of
but
food.
not a retail outlet for us. So that, I was just wondering what you felt the benefit was, and what the actual tax revenues would be.
Yeah, and understand as well, our tax consumption as a farm and as a family is almost nothing. We don't have kids in the school system. We don't utilize much in the way of town expenses. I mean, we're at very much a net win for the town in terms of this property, in terms of what we contribute to the tax base and then what we take back out of it, even in our current setting. And that's going to be even more pronounced with any kind of further development that we do here. We're definitely a net contributor to the town tax roll.
Thank you.
Okay, Steph.
I had a question about water, and mostly because, let me say that I'm not a farmer, so I don't really understand about farming operations per se, but I was really confused about how the crops were getting their water and where it came from. You made one, there was one comparison between if you had a dairy farm versus a not dairy farm, but that's not what we're talking about. And I was confused about the rainwater. I don't know if you're using rainwater or if you're drawing water from your ponds, or how happens. And I have to confess, mostly it's because I'm really ignorant about how farming works. But if you could just give me a kind of thumbnail of what that all means.
Sure, yeah. Good question. It's worth clarifying. There's a lot of numbers to get thrown at you quickly because we were trying to be quick. So the water for the plants in the greenhouses will be drawn from a dedicated well for this particular set of greenhouses. So that'll be well water from on the farm. And what we were trying to show by talking about the dairy is that
This farm used to be a dairy.
yeah, so this farm was a dairy farm
when we moved here.
before we moved to it, and then when we moved here, we've been transitioning it. So what we were trying to show is that the property has a track record of being able to provide more well water than what we're going to be using moving forward. Okay, so the dairy was watered off of a well on the farm, using more water than what we plan to use from a well on the farm. So does that make sense? We're not going to capture rainwater. We're not going to irrigate with rainwater. We want that rainwater to go back to the wetlands so that the wetlands continue their cycle and are healthy.
Yes,
Is there anybody, Christine, I know you already asked a question. Is there anyone else who has a question who hasn't asked a question? Steve?
Yeah. So I have some questions about the soil. Inside the greenhouse, oh, by the way, I'd like to say that I am in a butter. Apparently, I'm spreading disinformation and that sort of thing, but we've been disparaged a bit in this presentation. So, but I have questions related to the facility itself. I understand that the greenhouses have a bed and that there's soil on top of that. Can you go through that layer by layer?
Yeah, so the top layer is topsoil and organic composts and soil amendments and all that for growing surface. Under that, there's a layer of it's like a perforated pipe, and so to keep it's what we call the heat sink. So to keep the soil beds warm and to reduce the amount of heating that we have to put into the greenhouses, we're actually capturing the hot air when it's cold out. We're capturing the hot air that's near the peak of the greenhouses, and we're injecting that warm air into the soil so that it warms the soil beds so that we don't have to heat the greenhouses as much. And then under that, it's just native, whatever the soil under that heat sink is what it is.
Okay, so where's the soil coming from? That's
right
going
on site.
Pardon me?
Right on site. So
on site.
We think that there'll be enough soil on site for this. If there's not, then that's something we'll have to identify. Again, this is the challenge of presenting before we have all of the engineering completed. We believe we have adequate soil on site for our growing needs. If we don't, then we'll have to turn to a vendor.
Okay, so another question. I think you said in the neighbors meeting that you're going to be running the Mansfield facility too, right? For Agbotic?
Yeah, that looks to be the way, as long as the bandwidth is there for me. You know, this project's going to be happening first. By all accounts, it's likely to happen before the Mansfield one does. So if we get this farm operational and we find out that I don't have any time to spare, then someone else will have to run that one.
Okay, so so you're not working for Agbotic at this moment, right?
No.
Okay.
No, I continue to just be employed on the farm here.
Okay. Does So you don't have a ballpark value of the facility, no estimate of how much?
No, because we're still finalizing our design. You can't really get any pricing even on materials and installation until you have your design finalized. And we're still trying to work with the engineers to finalize a design. It's really hard to put, I could make up a number, but there's no point.
Okay. So you mentioned that a number of smart farms are failing, or other competitors, I guess, to Agbotic. Is Agbotic financially sound?
So this comes up some, and I'm going to answer it. I want to preface by saying I'm going to answer it, but understand that from a regulatory or a evaluatory principle, people are free to enter into any business venture they want anytime, regardless of whether the financials make sense. People operate at their own risk all the time. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I think it was Rose had some question, maybe it was Christine had a question about what would happen if we were to fail. We've been given access to the financials for the company. The financials are very strong. We don't anticipate that we will have any trouble in being successful. It's farming, so there's always some risk inherent with farming. We're moderately smart people. We're exceptionally hard workers. We will put everything we have into this project, like we do everything that we do here on the farm, and we firmly believe that we'll be successful.
Yeah, I think it can be shown that Agbotic is actually very highly leveraged.
Well, it's a startup, Steve. It's a startup, right? So startups inherently, startups are inherently capitalized. So it's normal, actually. If you were to look at our surface farming operation, the ROI on all the equipment that we bought for our surface farming operation was 10 years. And if you looked at our analytics for our operation, then everybody would have said that we were going to fail. So you have to be, if you want to look at data with a preconceived outcome, you can make the data support whatever you want it to a point. But if you look at the data, Meg's father's an economist. He's very, very smart. We've seen far more full disclosure documents, confidential, highly proprietary information from them than what's available as a matter of public record. So we feel very, very strongly about where they're at, and especially this year, they've really turned it on with the New York farm, and their numbers are very, very good.
I know they do some bottling. Are you planning to do any bottling?
It's hard to say. They are close to launching a beverage line. The amount of bottling they'll need to do, I don't think they're going to need more than one facility. So if they already have a facility that's going to package for them, then I don't know that they would need us to do it, or that we would do it. I think we're going to focus on growing food.
That's all I have, but I suspect there are more people with questions too.
Okay, Janet, you had a
What you mentioned that there's not going to be any runoff, but you're putting a lot of organic material on the soil and you're watering it. So I'm wondering, is there going to be some leachate, or are you going to have any effect on groundwater?
It's a fine question, Janet. Thank you. No, we don't anticipate so, because of all the very prescriptive soil sampling we're doing. So in any kind of agriculture, the best practices and the responsible way to amend your soil, whether it's in a greenhouse or whether it's a surface farm, is to use the bare minimum. So from an economic standpoint and from an environmental responsibility standpoint, it's a really bad idea to put more in than what you need. And so we're only going to be amending the soil to what it needs. And we're talking about things like worm castings, compost. They're not tremendously high nutrient availability. So the nutrient load appears to be utilized by the plants as they need it, and not really won't have a chance to precipitate out. Plus, we're not overwatering. Part of the problem that you see with groundwater pollution and things like that, especially on surface farming, is you don't have control over the amount of water that that crop or that land might see right after it's been amended. So if you have a highly mobile nutrient like a phosphorus or a nitrogen, and you apply it and you get a tremendous amount of rain, it's really easy for that nutrient to be washed into waterways. But because we're not overwatering and having a risk of driving that nutrient down through the soil structure, it pretty much stays in place so that the plants can utilize it.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. Geothermal uses, I think it's a great idea, but it does use a lot of electricity to move the water. So I was wondering, when you mention your electric loads, are you taking that into consideration?
Yeah, and that's another great question. And yes, so we actually had a comprehensive geothermal study that was done for us. It shows some pretty remarkable numbers in terms of how much less power it would take to run the geothermal over conventional. It's something like 30% less, because heating and cooling a space that large by moving either air conditioning a building that big, or by heating it with either electric or natural gas or propane, there's a lot of energy consumption and cost to that. So the geothermal actually looks like it's much less consumption, even though you are very correct. It's circulating pumps, basically. It's circulating pumps and heat pumps. And we're actually looking at trying to evolve the preconceived notions about how you have to condition the air for a greenhouse. So one of the challenges is saying, well, we don't need to keep the greenhouse necessarily at a certain temperature in the summer. What we actually have to try to do is affect relative humidity, because the heat doesn't really matter. The plants they're okay with an 85 or 90 degree growing temperature. It's when you get high relative humidity that you start seeing disease and condensation and places for bacteria to grow and for the plants to do poorly. So if we can manage humidity by dehumidifying that air and then using that water for irrigation and cutting down on how much water we have to draw from the well, and we're trying to be kind of smart about the holistic picture.
And I have two more questions, if that's okay. Since we live in Ashford, what plans do you have for power outages?
Yeah, because we lose power every month at our place. We already have 2 generators that we have to run on the farm here. So we will not be trying to power the whole farm in the case of a power outage. We will have a standby generator for cold storage so that we don't lose food product, and for minimal utilities to make sure that we don't have a freeze. But it's not realistic to try to do comprehensive power replacement for us.
Okay, and so I live near Moon Road, which is not paved, and I use it a lot to head into northern Ashford. In the winter, it's really a mess, and by the end of the winter, it's full of potholes. It gets muddy, it gets slippery. It's not. There's lots of times that I won't use it. So I'm just a little concerned over the town's liability if there's more traffic on your on Varga Road that's unpaved.
Yeah, and so I mean, I don't know. Is your question what's our plan for that?
I'm just putting it out there. Catherine's here. I just think,
Yeah.
I would just want to
So
protect us as taxpayers and the people who live on the road as well.
yeah. So we mentioned during the presentation that if there's a negative impact from what we're doing, we're talking about adding, probably 10 cars a day to a road. Because again, some of those people that we're going to be employing already live here, myself, my sister, people like that. So we're adding a small amount of cars to a road. We're going to have our small and medium small delivery vehicles on the road, probably no worse than UPS. We're going to have less trips a day than UPS. UPS seems to be like every 20 minutes we see a UPS truck going by. But if we need to be responsible citizens and sit down and talk to Joe and sit down and talk with the Board of Selectmen and say, look, this one section of road that was built through the swamp 100 years ago and never had a proper subbase put in needs 100 feet of the geotextile matting put down for soil stabilization and 6 inches of aggregate put over the top of it. That would be a pretty standard engineered solution for just about any dirt road that has an unstable base, which is what causes potholes and causes ruts and things like that, is an unstable base. If we have to do that, then we'll figure that out. I mean, I don't think people that know us and see what we do around here would doubt that we're not irresponsible people. We're not looking to somehow take advantage of the town or somehow take advantage of our neighborhood.
A good chunk of the dirt portion of Varga is our farm, so it is, utilized by our farm vehicles to get to that property.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is Claudia. I'm here with my family, and we have a few questions. And just to mention that I've been in a butter to this property for 46 years. And Chris and Melissa are here with me, and we do have some questions.
Okay, well, there's 2 other people, Claudia, who've had their hand raised. Christine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So after Christine and Steve, then you can go, Claudia, okay?
Okay, thank you, Loretta.
Sure. Go ahead, Christine.
Okay, so you say you're going to be growing microgreens. When I go to the farmer's market and stores and some other places, the microgreen person never has anybody buying anything from him. And I'm not sure why you think that would be a really good thing to sell. And the other thing that concerns me about that is when you were talking about the New York Robotics farm, it sounded like they were having a little bit of a problem finding places to distribute their product. So is this really a good product to be working with at this point?
So again, I understand people are concerned about the economics because they want to make sure they're not left with a blight. The microgreens are actually the most profitable, the most successful product being produced at the moment. The margins on them is tremendous. The input costs to grow them are nominal. The microgreens are very, very successful, and the New York farm is not having any trouble whatsoever distributing them.
Okay. All right. A couple of quickies. So you say you're going to have the surface be the existing soil. It's my understanding there was Roundup over those fields for decades, maybe, or for a really long time. So how do you get your farm certified as organic?
There's a few there's really, in this area, there's one main governing council that will have to approve our plan for organic production, and any of the soil that falls in the, trying to come up with language that makes sense. So if soil that's on the farm won't meet the threshold for certification, Then it's the soil that we will use around the greenhouses for the grass and the landscaping and the soil stabilization outside of the operation. So it won't be utilized to grow food. It'll be utilized to do the landscaping and the soil stabilization externally, where we, again, plan to continue not using any chemicals, herbicides, or pesticides.
Okay, one more, just one comment, and then I'll get out of here. I love the idea of this kind of way of growing food, but not on really good agricultural land. I would love to see it on the top of a old warehouse, as has been done, or on a brownfield, as we have in Ashford, or other places that aren't good agricultural land. So, that's, I guess, one of the things that concerns me is that we're taking really beautiful farmland and covering it over. So that's all. Thank you. But I love the concept. I think it's kind of beautiful, just not for perfectly beautiful land.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, so back to the soil. It's, as I recall, it's 18 inches deep, Luther, the topsoil?
It's still under design, Steve. You're going off of historical data from what the New York farm has done and what the proposed plan for Mansfield is. I've actually asked the engineers to take a hard look at that because the vast majority of growth happens in the top several inches of the soil. So in my mind, I don't personally understand why we need an 18-inch depth of soil bed when we're only growing in the top 6 or 8 inches of it. So I've asked for some engineering to be done on whether that depth is appropriate or whether it needs to be modified. So I don't know what the topsoil bed depth is going to be at this point.
Okay. What are they using? I think the plan is to use 18 inches in Mansfield, correct? Isn't that part of the plans?
Again, that is all under review. That's all under review from engineering. The depth of topsoil is not critical to their zoning permit. It wouldn't be critical to our zoning permit. The depth of topsoil is really a function of how much topsoil is needed to grow the food.
Right. No, but what it speaks to is the where the soil comes from, whether or not you have to truck it in, and just how many loads of material need to come in. If it was 18 inches, I think it would take 100 dump trucks to fill just one greenhouse. I've done those calculations.
It's plausible, but we don't anticipate trucking in topsoil.
Yeah, okay. Well, if you're getting it from the site, which I presume is 3 acres, I think you're going to be disappointed, because if you put a shovel in the ground around here, you know that there's not any more than maybe 4 inches of topsoil in the ground.
We have fields here that have 5 feet of topsoil on them. We have fields here that have a foot. We have, even in the woodlands, there's red sandy loam down 3 feet in the woodlands, and that just needs organic matter blended into it, and it's a perfectly suitable growing medium.
Could be. Maybe you'll get lucky. And a last question about how the electric runs. As you know, it's a scenic road. Changes to a scenic road are governed by ordinance. And how do you plan to bring the power to your site?
So Eversource is our vendor in this area. So Eversource does all the design work on that. If you drive down Cushman Road, the exact same kind of power feed that we would be utilizing comes off 44 and goes all the way up Cushman Road. It's 3 hot wires hung from a ground. So it's a little diamond-shaped array that gets hung off the poles. It looks, to the average person, it looks no different than the service wires and the feeds that are there. And
Yeah, I
then
understand.
we will run underground service to the greenhouses, so that we won't be doing any overhead poles or overhead transmission lines on the farm. I don't have an interest in running overhead. I want to run underground.
Okay, all right. So you're going to go underground from
the road,
from the last pole that's there, because there are no poles between Claudia's house and our house, as you know.
Correct.
Okay. That's all.
Okay, Claudia, wherever you are, you're next.
Okay, we're right
Actually,
here.
can you give me just a moment? I was ill prepared for an hour of questions. I wasn't anticipating
He needs a
public
bio break.
questions. I wasn't anticipating this many. So can I just get a glass of water really quickly?
Certainly.
Okay,
Certainly,
bear
Luther.
with us for just a moment.
Okay.
I had to get a second cup of tea.
And I'm sure we all made bio
Probably
breaks
going to go on
already.
record as one of our longest meetings, so I appreciate everyone's patience in hanging on here and continuing to ask questions and be alert and aware, even though it's getting later and later.
Okay, I made it. Sorry, I was running out of voice.
Okay, Claudia?
Hi there. So Chris, Melissa have some questions, and they're my family, as we all know, and they're supporting me.
So this is Chris Coyle. I'm the son-in-law of Claudia, married to Melissa. And we've heard for several hours now what Luther and the Heffleys and Meg are for. And I think it's a good way to sort of start this on a positive note of what Claudia and, if I might, Steve and Mary are for. First, they're very much for innovative technology. I think it was said tonight, there's no issue with the amount of innovation in agriculture in America. We're absolutely for an open dialogue, increasingly in our country and in our town. We need to remember that where one person's right ends, another right begins. And as property owners, in Claudia's case, for 46 years, well before Dennis Sylvia Heffley ever bought the farm, Claudia and her family hand-built the log cabin. So they're all in. Melissa grew up there. These are people who are truly dedicated to the land location. And for decades, they've looked over corn and hay seasonally grown. So to understand casually that some greenhouses learned soon after New Year's would be built, and to explore that to find out 25 feet from the stone wall where her gardens are and she sits in a chair will be the back of some 34, 35 foot 6 greenhouses does sort of get someone's attention. So I would submit.
No, I'm sorry, they're 52 feet wide and there's 6
right,
of them.
But height. So what I would submit is the right of abutters, Steve and Mary and Claudia, to raise questions isn't about education and understanding how great this is. It's about the use of the property. And as is obvious, what we are dead against is the destruction of farmland in the name of agriculture. To us, that's nonsensical. And as you'll hear, and I'm going to try and go quickly because there's a lot to unpack here. So, knowing who we are and what we stand for, a couple of comments. First of all, the Connecticut Farmland Trust. Steve and Mary and Claudia and Melissa and myself knew Bill Parity, met Bill Parity. We walked the farm, Melissa and I did, with Bill Parity at one time. And if you read the deed restriction, you will see that the very first page speaks of conserving land. It's conservation. The purpose of the agreement is not to further some notion of agriculture, is to preserve farmland. You also note in section 4, it's very clear that prohibited activities include industrial and commercial activities. So I just want to point out that for the Connecticut Farmland Trust to incentivize the destruction of farmland, I think is something is under consideration by them. I think it's premature to say they're no opposition enthusiastic. That's certainly not the information we've gained. But I just want to point out for a minute the essence, sort of where you started. You were read the Connecticut state statute, and we'll have more to say on this fact in the days to come. But you were told that this statute, which defines agriculture, therefore allows the building of what are known as controlled, and you should write this down, by the way, we'll provide the citations to all this information, but they're known as controlled environment agriculture or indoor farming. And you will note in that they are referred to indeed as plant factories and so forth. And what is important to point out is when one looks at the statute, and we really would urge all members of the Conservation Commission to look at it closely, you see a word called incidental to. And if you look it up, you will see that it means a minor contributing part of, but not the whole part. In other words, it's supportive of. So a good example is hay. The farm can grow hay. The nature feeds the hay water and sun. And if a hay barn is built, it is indeed a structure incidental to the agricultural activity. It's supportive, but it's not fundamentally necessary for the agricultural activity. And indeed, in the statute, they give lots of examples of what are known as traditional farming. We also know, and please feel free, I'm sure you all will, to check lawyers, but statutes are interpreted in the context and the legislative intent of when they were written. You can't imbue into them a new definition. The more difficult words for someone proposing indoor farm factory or plant factories is the words ordinary farming operations. In fact, the statute repeats it 3 times. So I will end this part by pointing out that certainly Agbotic Paradise and the other indoor farming controlled environmental agricultural factories are not ordinary farming operations. They're in fact extraordinary. Luther the other day or last week in an EDC meeting called them extraordinary, would put Ashford on the map nationally because it's so revolutionary. And we agree with them. It is, but it's certainly not ordinary, and it'd be hard pressed for anyone. Finally, the Conservation Commission should be clear that it's not up to a zoning enforcement officer or someone unilaterally to decide that. And what we've been told is that because this is a permitted use, it will be approved and there'll be no review. So unlike Mansfield that actually had a review, the plan somehow that has been set, we don't know how, communicated to Steve both verbally and in writing, is that when Luther brings his plan that's stamped, it will be stamped by the town. We object to that. We will make that objection clear. We believe if there needs to be interpretation of what the statute means, a court will do that, not a single officer who is not a resident of Ashford and is not an elected official. So we believe that the commission should absolutely push for a full special permit review and not this rubber stamp. So let's deal with a couple of things pretty quickly. First of all, let's deal with the claims. Understandable that information provided has been misleading. All the information provided is from Agbotic itself in New York or in its application Mansfield and other publications. So I want to provide a context here, first of all. If you were to Google things like Gotham Greens or indoor farming, what you will see is that it's a very robust, vibrant industry. It's got public companies, it's got venture capital of hundreds of millions of dollars. So Steve's question and others about the viability, is very well placed. If you look at the finances of Agbotic, they have several levels of LLCs and owners and bank loans. It's as complex as a foreign bank. And so the idea that this is transparent, simple, profitable is really not apparent to the public. And nor have they provided Ashford inexplicably or anyone else an actual business plan that shows the current and projected price of these greens, what the cost is to grow them, and the profit. But what we do know is that Agbotic in New York has needed successive loans and investors, including through hidden LLCs where the names of those investors appear to be hidden, takes place. So that information is available on the web, as is the following couple of details. First of all, electrical use. There are several indications or statements by Agbotic itself as to the use, and of up to about 2 kilowatts. There's an article, megawatts. There's an article that was published several years ago about Agbotic in New York hitting the grid limit in New York. That means their expansion plans were stopped because the grid in New York State could not handle the load. And in that article, they talk about the fact that they would need an additional 6 to 9 megawatts of electricity for Agbotic's multi-million-dollar expansion. And so when you do the math and you divide the megawatts by the number of greenhouses, you again come to about 2.25 megawatts. Further, if you look at the Mansfield plan and you look at their proposed fuel cell, they talk about providing 100% usage for the farm. Again, 2.8 megawatts. So that which is described by the promoters of this Agbotic paradise as being misleading are from data all available from Agbotic and online. I would also offer that as you read about some of the environmental groups that are asking questions, including Cornell University, you will find that they all absolutely zero in on the fact that these are intense energy users and claims of carbon neutral are well overstated. In fact, tomorrow when we send the links, we will send you a link of a group that is really calling it, what they call it, greenwashing. That there are all these claims about environmental neutral that don't add up. For example, chicken manure from Yukon, according to Yukon itself, is absolutely not organic. Those chickens are fed antibiotics, and all the farms that are pretending they're getting organic material are misleading the public. It's not. It's still Yukon itself will tell you that if you ask them. Let's go to water, though, which is really more troubling. You've heard things about irrigation. As everyone knows, that farm has never been irrigated. I don't think there are plans to irrigate it. The natural seasonal cycles have always fed the corn and now hay. And in years of drought, that became a little tough. But what we do know is with a deep well, the 1.2 million to 1.6 million gallons a year of water that will be pumped from the aquifer will never run dry until the wells run dry. So the idea that cows that are drinking surface water and those kinds of things are worse than this is a totally, in our view, inaccurate, and I'm sorry to say, I don't mean this personally toward Megan Luther, but misleading comparison. The fact is that in their own report in New York, they reported 1.279 million gallons a year. And last week in Luther's neighborhood gathering, he mentioned the figure of 4,500 gallons, which adds up to 1.6 million. So again, if misleading, we apologize. We're simply taking numbers that were provided by Agbotic and by Luther. So a couple of other points here very quickly. I know it's been a long evening. We appreciate your time to hear Claudia, and on behalf of Claudia, Steve, and Mary, you've heard about why Agbotic's approach is very unique. And we agree. It sounds very good. But what Luther and Meg may be misunderstanding is, I don't think anybody certainly sitting here in our home tonight, Claudia's home, object to the idea of controlled environment agriculture. Agponic in soil is all wonderful, but there are a couple of facts. One fact is that indeed the markets are becoming swollen and overrun with all these great ideas. While apparently there is some debate on which retired professor from UConn is more substantial or to be heard from, but I would point out that Ron Cottrell is emeritus professor, was director of food marketing policy, now the Zwick Center at the University of Connecticut. And in his analysis, he simply points out that the amount of energy and money to make a green and then driven puts Agbotic at a cost disadvantage. It may be better, it may be worse. That's not up for him to judge. But he simply, in his reports, and you should contact him and ask for it, and of course he's biased. He's against having farmland that was protected, in that case by the state agriculture department, destroyed in the name of agriculture. So sure, Luther's right, he is biased. However, he made a trip to New York State and he went into Wegmans and so forth, all these places that said Agbotic sells to. And what he found was, and they're called facings, a gigantic section of high-end greens. And Agbotic had apparently 3 facings in lower right corner. We all realize that these products have a short shelf life. So the claim that they have customers coming after them all isn't substantiated by what I'm the first to admit probably is not a representative market research of all the outlets. But when a company is trucking greens all the way into New York City to Gramercy Park Restaurant and has 3 facings in a New York, central New York supermarket, I think the observations made tonight have merit, that someone at Ashford should really look at, we're spending a lot of time and money, why don't we have a business plan? Most people have a business plan. I would point out in the loan documents from Agbotic, and their latest one, their business is described as agritech. That's right. Agbotic is a CEA agritech company. So for someone to say this is farming or ordinary farming operations really needs to only read or look at the words Agbotic uses themselves. Luther, in extraordinary setting, nationally different, they're right, they are. They're not ordinary farming operations under the statute. So, wrapping this up, what we would ask the Conservation Commission to do is to demand, I can't say it any other way, that in this case, with this amount of controversy from Mansfield, the questions about studies and what's going on here, and to be specific, Claudia raised concerns about meetings that some of which were non-public, where individuals promoting the project did not ever disclose their interest in this project, their work on it, and most importantly, the benefit of things like tax abatements to specifically and primarily this project. Nor did they disclose in the planning and zoning meetings that things like changing the nuisance law, changing the driveways, changing signage of roads, all accrue to the benefit if someone were building Agbotic Paradise on Varga Road. Our only issue was these were not properly disclosed, the interest. There was an analysis done of why are we asking for this, who has the problem. So we're just pointing out, we think strongly that Ashford should require everyone involved with anything coming before a commission to sign a document saying they're aware of the ethics ordinances and they must fully disclose any perceived or real conflicts of interest, jobs being offered, employment, and so forth. And I speak for Claudia and Steve Mary, will not back down on that. That needs to be open and transparent process. So finally, the local site plan or the schematic. When Claudia received this, we immediately wondered how or what this scale was. So in the presentation we made some time ago, Melissa took town plat maps and the dimensions and simply drop that image onto the plat maps to see what it would show. We also put dimensions which would be reasonable and customary site envelope infrastructure, like a road. And if you look, for example, at the road in the slide he showed, it's smaller than Varga Road. Now, this is going to have trucks going in and out, so forth. The perimeter is going to be much, much larger. And if you need evidence of that, just look at the site plan in Mansfield to look at the amount of excavation and fill that will be required to bring it to level. And as I think you all know, planning and zoning has regulations where they regulate, particularly in light of the issue that occurred a few years ago with.
Okay, Chris, it's getting late.
Yeah.
This is not a debate. This is supposed to be a question for Luther. He gave information. You gave a lot of information to us the last meeting. Now we were listening to Luther. If you have some questions, that's fine. But I don't think it's appropriate at this meeting for you to engage in such a lengthy statement without asking a question of Luther. I understand that you have a lot to say, but we have heard a lot of this. And what this purpose is for Luther to say things and for us to ask questions so that we can better understand what he told us. If you have a question for Luther, that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. But I think that we're all getting really tired. We've been here for well over 2.5 hours, and I don't know how much more of this we can all take in. So I don't want you to waste your time when we're really tired. I'm certainly
Absolutely.
so.
Absolutely appreciate
certainly, if you have a question, I don't want to stop you from asking a question of Luther.
Right.
I mean,
I would point out that the substantial amount of time was Luther presenting, so we appreciate the opportunity to put a few comments on the record, since many of the comments he made pertain to comments or statements or documents we provided. But we do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is, we note in presentations, statements, and even tonight that the actual dimensions of the project don't seem to be forthcoming. And I guess the question would be, are the calculations wrong when we take the dimensions that you put out and calculate them? They come out to be 178,350 square feet pragmatic paradise, and that's just the building. So if one
That's incorrect.
Building site.
Okay, that's the building site. So could you tell everyone?
That is incorrect. It's 135,000 square feet plus a little bit. I don't have the slide. Hang on.
It was in the presentation.
Yeah, it is. Let me just pull up the slide. It is. I should know it off the top of my head by now. 135,800 square feet.
And that's just the buildings.
That is the buildings.
So do you have an estimate for everyone on the cistern that will be required for fire water, the cogeneration plant, fuel cell, the storage, the utilities? Is there a way people on this call could understand the true building or site envelope that we understand will be primarily pavement or concrete or compressed crushed stone? What is the total envelope?
We won't know a total building envelope until we have the final engineering completed and have a final site plan for submission. Our anticipation is that all the utilities, other than a pad-mounted transformer per Eversource spec, will be located in the large utility building that's attached to the greenhouses, and we will not need any additional surface buildings at all. That building is large enough to house everything other than the pad-mounted transformer. You mentioned a cogen power facility. I mentioned during the presentation, we are not doing one of those. Those are only achievable when there's a natural gas pipeline to utilize to run them. We don't have that, so we will not be doing one. We will not be doing pavement We will not be doing concrete other than where it's specified by code. The vast majority of the property will still continue to have impervious water infiltration around the buildings. Not impervious, but pervious water infiltration around the buildings. But I don't have a total disturbed area yet because I don't have the engineering back. But you have to understand it's in our best interests as a farm to minimize the amount of disruption to land that I already have taken a tremendous amount of time and money to put into production. So it does us absolutely, there's nothing at all to incentivize us to cause a greater disruption to the site than what is absolutely required.
The Mansfield site shows a 42-inch deep foundation to support the 18 inches of soil. And you've said that that may be different. Appreciate that, with pipes and infrastructure running through that. So isn't it not true that with the grade on this land, this will require significant excavation and infill like Mansfield? I think Mansfield's like 625 truckloads of crushed stone for infill, and that's just one-way trip. What do you see as the excavation and infill requirements on this project?
Again, with the caveat that we won't know for sure until we have the engineering completed. That site, based off of the GIS LiDAR topographical map that's available through NECOG, would indicate that we're looking at an approximate 5-foot cut to the terrain to the eastern side of the location, with that material being moved to the western side of the location and placed on site to achieve our flat ground for building. So we anticipate that the vast majority of any of the earthwork that has to happen will be sustained by the material on site. It's the most responsible and cost-effective way to achieve our needs.
Will you need to import in crushed stone and aggregate to build a foundation to code?
Foundations don't require crushed stone and aggregate, so no.
So Mansfield is bringing in a significant amount of crushed stone and fill, and you're saying your project won't need that?
I'm saying I can't tell you exactly what we'll need until we have final engineering, but it's important to understand that this project is not Mansfield.
Okay, just one last question. Luther, as you're aware, there is a zoning ordinance requiring access for the fire department, so forth, big trucks. The stone walls and the farm road access is clearly, or the one you show, is smaller than Wormwood. How will you address the town zoning requirements in terms of the amount of truck traffic that has to drive off Larga into your driveway? So is it not true, like Mansfield, that shows a 2-lane with shoulders, that a significant construction project to build an ingress and egress and safe entry and exit onto Varga will need to be built? Or is it, again, this different from Mansfield?
We'll be in compliance with all local regulations for zoning, for wetlands. Whatever that looks like, I'm sure the engineers will incorporate it. Our current ingress egress area has accommodated massive tractor trailers turning up into that field for the last 10 years to chop corn out of it without any problems whatsoever. So I'm sure that road cut will suffice, and we'll leave it with the engineers to do their work of designing the roadways. I mean, I just spent 6 years building roads for the town of Mansfield, and the laneways that we have outlined on that project should be sufficient for the kind of traffic we're talking about. We're not talking about having 50 cars a day coming and going and passing each other. It's people show up to work, some trucks leave with product, and then people leave at the end of the day. So whatever the zoning requirements, whatever the fire marshal advises us to do, we're going to accommodate. We're not looking to do anything other than be in full compliance.
Okay. Luther, thank you, and thank you to everyone for accommodating us. Obviously, we listened for quite a while, took a lot of notes. The final comment I will leave everyone is the utility poles required to bring up power on Varga Road will require, and again, you can ask Eversource, the larger green poles and significant tree cutting to accommodate the high voltage lines that will be up on those new poles. So everyone needs to be aware that there are many, many residual impacts of this project beyond the property itself. Not only the abutters, who have lots of issues and questions to ask the town, but also for all the residents such as this one. So thank you very much on behalf of Claudia and the family.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, does anyone else have a further question or two before we close here? And I noticed that someone new came on, Bob, and I don't know your last name. Could you put that in your ID for me?
While we're waiting for further questions, I would also like to note that, we did take the trouble to invite all of Varga Road to come up to the farm on Tuesday. We were really happy that the vast majority of the road did come, and we had conversations with many of them that evening after the presentation and in subsequent days. And we've gotten some really heartwarming comments from some of them that help sustain us. We understand this is an emotional process. We understand that the Maricos and the Ursons don't want to see this happen, that they have become accustomed to seeing the property as it is. And that's certainly their right. No one's trying to tell them that they can't feel the way they want to feel about it. But all we ask is that people respect that we're trying to do the best we can for the community and our farm. It is our farm, and it's very disheartening to come to these kinds of meetings and effectively be threatened to be sued over what we're trying to do. But we hope that if you folks have any further questions, you'll have us back, and we really appreciate the time.
Okay, yes, Christine. You're muted. You're muted, Christine.
Got it. One last question. Is there any property closer to your house that would be suitable?
Possibly. The trouble with, I don't know how many of you are familiar with our yard, but we don't have a lot of flat ground right out here. And if we had a spot here that I could put it right in our backyard, I would, because it would be a lot simpler than having to hear people's concerns about impact to viewshed and impact to their properties. It would be a lot simpler if we could do that.
Okay, really, the Conservation Commission really appreciates Luther, you and Meg coming and spending time with us and taking the time to explain your situation and your thoughts and what to do in terms of impacts and everything. Did I hear somebody?
I was telling the dog no. It was jumping up on. It's been 3 hours.
Reprimanded.
I knew it was the dog.
Okay. Anyway, I really appreciate also everyone being here and asking the questions. And it sounds like this is something that we need to continue to dialogue about and continue to figure out the facts and impacts and all of what's going on and listen to each other and have meaningful dialogue back and forth. So I think it's been a very successful meeting, and I appreciate everybody's comments and questions, and also appreciate your time, Luther, and your wife, Meg. And thank you everybody for hanging in, and I'm really tired, so I'm going to end the meeting.
Yeah, this was not at all what this is not at all what we expected. So, yeah.
Loretta, thank you for facilitating.
All right. Take care, everyone. All right.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.